we're here at Fan Expo 2010. I'm talking to Jeff McNally. He's the lead designer of Hegemony, which is a
real-time strategy war game for the PC.
Made in Toronto, independent guy, 5 guys, right?
Yeah, it's a team of initially 3, grew to 5, downtown Toronto. Took 6 years to develop. We put it out in May on our own, mainly downloadable, and then some box copies for trade shows such as this.
Now, as a small developer, a small team working on something for 6 years in Canada, keeping yourself going, finding the funding, was that challenging?
Yeah, that's always a bit of a challenge. We had some other small games we've done before, which we continue to sell on our website, then some private funding, and some of the research and development tax credits we qualified for through the federal SHRED program.
Did you consider ever shopping this around to any of the bigger publishers to see if there's any interest?
Well, we've had some interest now that the game's out from publishers, mostly the more medium-sized the publishers that do strategy games. We were over in Cologne, Germany at Gamescom a week ago talking to a few smaller publishers, and they've been showing some interest. We've signed for a German language version and to be released in Germany hopefully by Christmas.
But it seems to me that the PC gaming market is more robust in Europe still. It still survived that the gutting the consoles did in North America, and this kind of game seems to be something that has more appeal over there. Would you say that's the case?
I think that's what we've been seeing so far. The interest is spread out to some degree. There's a trickle of interest worldwide, but the European community seems to be more interested, and certainly the box copy market is still strong in Europe, whereas North America, we wouldn't even consider it, at least not as a small developer. You need huge marketing budgets to get attention the first day you're in the stores, or else you're ejected to the back shelf. So I think North America's pretty much been taken over by consoles, and then downloadable is...
How long have you been actually making games for yourself?
About 12 years now.
What did you do before game design?
Well, I'm also a physician. I practice. Again, for a while I was out of practice, and I was in Northern Ontario for a while, and now I'm more or less part-time practice.
Seems like you're following in the footsteps of the doctors from BioWare, because they started out with a strategy game, and now look where they are. So maybe we'll see you in 10 years' time, some...
Well, who knows? Who knows? They've done a great job, BioWare. We just like to make quality software and games that people will like and that we'll be proud of, and then hopefully that combination will result in enough sales to stay in business, essentially.
Let's talk a little bit more about the game in more detail. From what I can see, it has a bit of a total war feel to it, but there's some features obviously unique to your game.
Well, definitely there's some of that total war aspect in this strategy view, where you back out and you can see the icons representing the cities and troops. But one thing we did differently from them is from the strategy map, they transfer to a battle map for the actual tactical level. We've incorporated that all into one seamless map where you zoom in and the battles are occurring right there, and you zoom out and you can get a strategic overview, and you can jump in anywhere in the map, and it's all happening simultaneously. There's no separate battle boards and no reloading of maps or anything.
Is the engine your own technology?
Yeah, we developed it over a 6-year period. It's entirely our own technology.
Now, the gameplay centers around Philip of Macedon. It's that sort of Alexander the Great time period. Do you only get to play the one nation in the campaign?
In the current release, you play just as Macedonia. We have an expansion pack that we're working on right now, which should be out by the end of October, which will allow total sandbox play where players can play any of the small factions they want. For the main campaign, it seemed when we were first developing it was easier to focus on just Philip's career, and also it seemed kind of who would want to play anybody else? He has the phalangites, the companion cavalry, all the torsion catapults, the combined arms tactics, and a lot of the other aspects that he put together and that Alexander took with his invasion of the Persian Empire. But Philip developed all of that.
So the scale of the game, the map itself takes place in the Greek peninsula, and that's
we've mapped the Aegean basin from the Adriatic side of Greece in the west to partway through modern Turkey to the east. The north goes up, includes the Danube River Valley, and the south includes the island of Crete. So it's a fairly large area, probably 1 million square kilometers.
Now, I guess in the tactical battles, terrain plays a role and all those kind of things?
Well, terrain is definitely important. The main effect of terrain is the limitations on logistics and troop movements. There's a lot of constricted mountain pass regions that make it harder to get your troops into different areas and then bringing in enough food to keep them supplied. There was a good reason why armies were small in the inland areas. It's because it was hard to bring enough food to feed 10,000 guys. So we're trying to recreate that aspect of the logistics without making it so complicated as to be not, boring. You have to. There's always a trade-off between trying to be historically accurate and having enough gameplay fun to keep the players interested. So that's the key trade-off in design.
Is there city management and the economy? How do you generate funds to build your armies and all that kind of stuff?
Your trade routes generate income. Your city population generates income. You have mines that you can populate with slaves or workers that generate income when they're as long as they're connected by trade routes to your cities. You also get some increases in income from objectives, which is a comprehensive system of objectives which are based on historical aspects of Philip's campaign, whereas if you conquer a certain area you may get an increase in income. Income is, rather than have an accumulation of cash, it's entirely done as a cash flow system. So if you increase your income, it just increases your level of cash flow. There's nothing accumulates. If you don't spend it, doesn't build up. Because I found a lot of games when they design them, after about halfway into the game, you've got more cash than you ever needed, whereas early on you never had enough. So we tried to balance that with to make it so that there was still a need to increase your income as you played the game along. Population, which is also required to build troops, is based on the cities. In Macedonia, one of the things Philip did is he moved the rural people of Macedonia into the city sites at that time. So there's the cities of the Macedonian homeland that start out with very little population, and you get migrants as quest rewards, which you can then move into the cities to build up their population. The other cities in the game, to simplify it, all have fixed populations. The main difference in population control is if you get more income from a walled city, but you have to garrison a walled city to keep the city from revolting. Whereas if you tear down the walls, the city will never revolt because they'll be afraid that you'll come back, but they won't generate as much income. So there's a strategic trade-off between what areas you would leave as walled cities, as garrison points in your expanding empire, versus what the cost of manning those cities with garrisons, because each of the 26 different factions has an animosity rating directed towards Philip. So some of the enemy factions will be much harder to get. They'll take more troops to garrison to keep them from revolting. Others will be far more passive and cooperative once you've taken them over. So it's all built into the gameplay to try and recreate that historical aspects that Philip had to deal with as he became hegemon of the Greek world.
One thing I've always found about a lot of grand strategy games, such as this and other games in Total War, is that the AI very quickly becomes, towards mid to late game, you're just so powerful that you win every battle, and and they don't employ battlefield tactics. It just becomes, the early promise of when you're starting out, facing them is a challenge, but then eventually you just steamroll over everybody. And I don't know how do you sort of approach that to make the AI fun and challenging throughout the whole span of the game?
Well, we dealt with that by having the AI actually gets pretty difficult later on, because the more factions if you would attack at a faction, they'll counterattack, and so if the player tends to poke out and campaign in 3 or 4 directions at once, they might be attacked simultaneously from 6 sides, which could be quite difficult to deal with. What we've done is the initial release, we only had 1 difficulty level, and it turned out to be too difficult, so we had to release an upgrade that had the AI being less aggressive. The other thing we've done is more or less, again, by having the population and cash flow linked to a continuous scale rather than accumulate. You don't get that. One of the problems in a lot of games is you get that overwhelming amount of money by mid-game that you can then buy a force that's just impossible to stop. So that was the main way to dampen down the power that the player has. The other thing is that you have a limited number of Macedonian population points, and they're the only troops that will level up as you go along. So you'll end up with an elite force of Macedonian troops, phalangites, cavalry, hypaspis, which are the specialized personal bodyguard ground troops. Those will be your crack troops for sort of breaking through in different areas, but most of your troops will be made up of much weaker mercenaries, and they won't be that good at opening up areas. So in an area where you focus your phalangite sort of assault team, maybe 5,000 or 10,000 strong, you'll be able to probably beat just about anybody, but the map as it opens out in a continuous way will make it very difficult to be everywhere at once. So that'll make it, whereas I've noticed with some games that I've played, after a while you can build the same quality elite troops everywhere. And that's unrealistic, because really any more realistic expression of troop representation would have a pyramid-style structure where you'd have a small number of elite troops and a lot more lesser quality troops underneath. And we tried to make that part of the game design. Now, of course, ultimately the players will tell us how successful that has been.
Well, it does seem that as an independent designer, you've had the freedom to make some decisions that make the game better and more realistic, but might, in a larger company, have been passed over because, heaven forbid, you make it too difficult for the players. So, as an independent studio, you find that freedom to go in the direction you want to go is liberating?
Oh, very much so. I think the reason programmers and artists want to work for small companies like ours is because they want that. Both they want the freedom of being involved in more than one process of the game development. Like the programmers, I'm the lead designer, but the programmers and the artists we sit down together to discuss any design decisions. And I used to joke that I would make a design decision and then they would change it. So there's a lot of that sort of small group decision making where you get together and you decide, well, this looks like the best way to go. Whereas in a larger company, often they're segmented to a greater degree. They have to be segmented to a greater degree to be functional. On the other side, we're caught a little bit by developmental drift. Like we initially expected to take about 3 years to do this game, and we ended up taking about 6. Partly because a number of features that we developed, we decided we didn't like it so much, so then we just went back and redid that area.
Well, hopefully, being here and going to PAX will bring you guys some more success with the game. And I'd like to say thank you for talking to us. I'm definitely going to check it out myself. This is definitely up my street, and I had not heard of it until today, so thank you for being here to letting me know about you.
Well, thanks very much for dropping by. It's a pleasure to meet you and to be interviewed. Thanks again.
Thank you.